Well, thank you very much for coming through. And that's what people think, or how they think Valentine should be celebrated. What do you think as well? You can feel you are free to drop your comments on our live stream across all socials, from Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and also X. We're streaming live there. It's now time to do that conversation on the parents and children relationship. There's been something that came up always on the set for the 2 weeks that we've run. We realized that when marriage is very interesting until also children get in there, it changes the dynamics. Now, for those of you who say, oh, when the children grow, we know what to do, you are going to grow with them. And so how must the relationship, we want to get into that, and also how people also pass on quite a number of hate, love also onto the children. We want to look at the dynamics. Dr. Counsellor Mrs. Mary Anane-Mensah joins us to have that conversation with us. It's good to have you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We celebrated your husband as well earlier.
Thank you very much.
Indeed, indeed. How has it been? How many years though?
40 years last year.
Nice one. Nice one. Where did you first meet?
In church.
In church? Okay. He was a prayer warrior?
More in the evangelization side.
Okay. You too?
Yeah.
So you were the same. This is the second time we're hearing that particular one, that evangelist. Yes, again, absolutely. But of course, it's good to have you here as well. Thank you very much for your time. It's crucial also because most of us also maybe do not have the experience. Once you have not given birth before, you don't. Now you get married, it's a whole new world. And then before you know, children also coming. Sometimes you don't even prepare, not even with the needs, the financial needs, emotional needs and all of that. But Africa in general, or Ghana, the culture that persists here or pertains here, walk us through what you have seen and how we have raised children and what you have seen the parent and children relationship to be. Probably that will be a good starting point.
Okay, thank you very much. And happy Val's Day to all your viewers. Mm-hmm. And thanks for having me.
Yes, absolutely.
The issue of parenting is quite critical. And especially when you look at the changing dynamics, there's a lot of confusion when it comes to parenting now. And the confusion is playing out in the lives of both parents and children. And so the first thing that I have noticed is the general confusion, because we have parents who themselves need parenting.
Ish.
And they are supposed to be parenting. And so it's quite confusing. But as the saying goes, you can't give what you don't have. Mm-hmm. Because of our socio-cultural dynamics, you know, people who grew up, say, from the 60s all the way to the 80s have a certain idea about parenting. And then the younger generation also has its own ideas. But one thing that should guide us is our Christian values and our socio-cultural values. Most of the time, because of globalization, there's a bit of confusion there. So people can't really determine which set of values they are using. So people more and more are going in for the global values, which is adding to the confusion. But if we want to settle into a healthy, godly values of parenting, then we as Christians talk about our Christian values, and not forgetting the fact that we are Africans, we are Ghanaians. And so we look at our socio-cultural norms also. So once we understand this, it sort of defines our parenting. And once the parenting is defined, then we understand what we are doing. And so, for instance, to talk about the socio-cultural norms, there are certain things that are a no-no in our society as Ghanaians. For instance, talking and pointing at people with your left hand. There are certain cultures that don't have a problem with it. But in the Ghanaian context, it is seen as disrespectful, it is seen as uncultured. And so as Ghanaian parents, we know that we have to get our children to understand this.
Okay.
That you don't use your left hand, you don't point at people with your left hand when you are talking to them. Especially if they happen to be older than you.
Okay.
Even if they are your peers. Because we find it disrespectful to use the left hand to point at people, we let our children do and inculcate that value in them. Then when we come to the godly values, we have a set of instructions in our holy book, the Holy Bible, which talks about how parents should live with their children. The most popular one being Ephesians 6:1-4. That's some like to call the family code of ethics.
Right.
And when you talk about family code of ethics, then you can take it all the way from Ephesians 5, from 21, that talks about the relationship between husband and wife.
Okay.
Then from 6:1-4, talks about how parents should live with their children. And so the role of training is mentioned. The role of the emotional health is mentioned because it says that fathers should not do what? Should not do things that will discourage, provoke, or irritate their children, depending on what version you are using.
Yeah.
But that talks about the emotional relationship that fathers are mentioned. So when I mention fathers, my dear women, it's not because I'm trying to be discriminatory, but we are talking about the Bible here.
Yeah.
So I'm using the words that the Bible uses. It talks about fathers having a relationship with their children to train them in the ways of the Lord. And also that training should be done in love. And doing that training in love means that you also care about the emotional needs of the child. And so in other words, whilst training, we are also mindful of the child being happy. The child not being angry, the child not getting discouraged and all that. And so how do we mix all this so that our parenting is effective and at the same time not suppressive, not too restrictive? Because sometimes, it's easier for parents to stamp their authority in a way that restricts or suppresses the child. When you do that, maybe in their very early years, you may get away with it. But as they grow, they will begin to question that authority. Because it's normal, it's human nature, that when you are restricted too much, it gets to a point when you want to hit back. And so too much of the restriction is not good. Too much of the suppression is not good. Because parents can actually abuse their authority. And it's happened several times. Because they know they have the power of the cane, for instance. And so who are you to question me? This is what I'm asking you to do. And then you expect the child to obey without question. But it's not the best. Because
I see. Yeah, you land on that.
Because when that happens, then it becomes like the child is being forced to be what they are not, to be who they are not. And so their emotional identity becomes a problem.
I see.
And it can even bring a conflict between the child and the parent. Yeah.
I'm mostly bothered about the favorite child thing that goes around in families. So sometimes maybe parents have 3 children, 5 children, and one seems to be more appealing, or what's the word to use, more loved by one of the parents.
Yeah.
And they make it so obvious, it's a slap on the face of the others, right? I have seen the issue of favorite child break children and parents apart, and causing some people even their marriages. How do we manage that so that the child doesn't feel I'm the ogboro of love and the others are less loved? You know, how do we carry all these children along? Yeah, so that doesn't break the home, doesn't break their confidence, doesn't break our marriage at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's a genuine concern. It happens in many homes. And if it goes unchecked, this issue of the favorite child, my best one, first of all, what it does is it promotes dysfunctionality in families. And dysfunctionality can have far-reaching consequences. It goes beyond the generation in which it happens. And we have examples of that even in the Bible. So that's why it's good to have our values as a family. And the values don't come into effect when you start having children. Even as a couple, when we meet, right from the days of our courting, we must be able to define what those family values are.
Right.
So that we don't get to the stage of marriage and then start thinking, what are our values? And so we need to define those values very early in the relationship. And that includes our values when it comes to parenting. Now, as to liking somebody or loving somebody more than the other person, it's natural. The issue is this. We should always let our head lead us when it comes to issues of that nature. Sometimes a mother may be very attached to a particular child because maybe it was a very challenging pregnancy. Maybe they nearly lost that child, and something about the child, but mostly when that vulnerability is present, there's that natural attachment.
Right.
And so when values are not well defined for the parents to understand their roles, the role of a mother, the role of the father. Ephesians 6:1-4 clearly talks about the father being the one to train. And so he is like the person who should instruct and guide the children. Now, when you have a case where a mother, because of certain circumstances, seems to be very attached to a child, it can create problems within the family. So that even when that child is going astray and the father wants to correct, it can be a problem. So that should be checked. And I want to appeal to both spouses. Fathers have their role to play. Mothers have their roles to play. We shouldn't allow our personal sentiments to get in the way of these roles. Because the moment we do that, it can create problems. When we go back to the Bible, in the household of Isaac, we see this dysfunctionality at play. And if you know the extent to which dysfunctionality can go, it can even distort destinies. We saw it in how they treated their twin sons. Yeah. There was a lot of dysfunctionality there. The mother trying to get in the way of what the father was doing, instead of her trusting in the promise that God had given her, knowing that God would definitely guide the steps of his people into that destiny that he had already talked about. She chose to go ahead of God, and so many things happened.
Right.
And so we don't want those things replicated in our families. And so as much as possible, mothers, let's allow fathers to play their roles, no matter how much we are attached to that child. And also, we should be guided by fairness. You know, you may love somebody more than the other person. But when we talk about fairness, it means we treat them the same. We do not disadvantage one over to the advantage of the other. It is wrong. And so as parents, no matter how much we be attached to a particular child, we should always remember that they will not remain children forever.
I see.
And we should not allow that attachment to interfere with their upbringing.
Alrighty. There are people who probably have grown up, and my experience speaks volume to that, where I never experienced any marriage where I saw maybe a father and a mother around. I've never even seen a child born before. I've never experienced it. Only for me to be introduced to that world of marriage and then childbirth. And so what it means is that you'd have to rely on maybe reading books and all of that, which is not really practical. How do you walk people like some of us through to be able to have a success? Because I don't have any relevant previous knowledge on that. And so how do you help people like us in parenting and becoming the best of the best we can be?
Okay. The church is one very good example for training people to be parents.
Okay.
Because we have children and we have parents in the church. Mostly our pastors are expected to be the guide to all of us. And as much as possible, I know they live up to that. Nobody is perfect. Nobody is perfect. So we all have our strengths and our weaknesses. But when it comes to parenting, and we have people we look up to, you know, mentoring cuts across. In everything, when you have a mentor, it also helps. So as aspiring parents, who are our mentors? And in the church, in the body of Christ, we can easily find a mentor or mentors. If we are minded, if we are so minded, we'll definitely get them. Besides the mentors who we can talk to, who we can submit ourselves to for guidance, reading also helps us. Just like we read about anything, so that as we read and gain that insight about what constitutes effective parenting with examples of that, it helps us. Then the counseling that we go through. And so the pre-marriage counseling is very, very important. You know, the fact that we come from a background where parenting was not effective doesn't mean we should perpetuate it. We could always change it. Because if, let's say you had parents who didn't have the benefit of formal education, and they put you through school, it tells you straight away that your pathway is different. Your destiny is different. So it's no excuse that maybe you grew up in a family where parenting was not effective. That is why your parents gave you a start that is different from theirs. So it now becomes your duty to find a way of making up for that shortfall that you saw growing up. And so nobody actually has an excuse not to learn effective parenting. And then there's nothing like perfect parenting. In everything, we seek to improve. We seek to get better. And so once in a while, we may have slippages here and there. But it's always good to do a self-audit, a family audit, a parenting audit from time to time. How effective are the methods that we are using?
Right.
And apart from that, we also know that because life is in stages, the way we parent babies is different from the way we parent toddlers, the way we parent adolescents, the way we parent young adults, and so on and so forth. Because we're actually supposed to grow with our children. Now, if we stick to the style that we used when they were children, where they had to obey us in everything, because we felt that they hadn't gotten to the age of wisdom where we could trust their judgment. And so we showed parenting in a way that was suitable for children. Once we see them growing, it means that we need to change our style. And so the audit helps us to adjust and adapt as we go along. And one thing we should always not forget, it's good for parents to admit to children that I was wrong, I had it wrong, and to ask them to forgive you. It's very important, because we have a lot of adults walking with baggage from their childhood, because the parents felt they had the right to treat them in any way that they wanted, and they felt that they didn't owe them any apologies. So when they grow up with that hurt, that emotional baggage, consciously or unconsciously, they take it out on other people. But when we have the courage to apologize, it tells them that, oh, so this wasn't right. And because they come to the realization that it wasn't right, then the likelihood of they repeating it is less. But when we let it go, they are likely to repeat it.
Absolutely. And that's very instructive. Make sure that you can, even if you can go down on your knees, it's fine. But it's to say that if you are wrong, tell your child, I am sorry, and that I faulted, and forgive me. I promise to do right next time. But of course, that's Dr. Counsellor Anane-Mensah. Thank you very much for coming. We're grateful. Absolutely. Coming up, still to come, we will have Mr. Kofi Nkrumah joining us. There's also Kofi Boham. There are some poets in the house as well who will be coming through. But Jason Nelson stands by with Forever. Enjoy this music. We'll be back.